Hi students, I am right now in my evening class at my home, and as I have promised that we will start our evening session from my home. So the students who are engaged in some job issue or things like that in the morning, they can join us in the evening. So today I will talk about book 17 test 1 speaking section, and this test is I think more interesting because the reason is that there are new and novel questions in this book. So we will discuss those questions, and right now students, should we start? Students, in this book we have to deal with some new questions. The first question is what did you study in history lessons when you were at school? So what did you study in history lessons when you were at school? So basically this is a question from past. I have to tell that what I used to study when I was at school. So first of all, I would like to say that when I was at school, basically the teachers used to teach us national history and the topics related to national history that used to cover the area in which our forefathers struggled hard day and night, and they toiled hard in order to attain Pakistan. So basically I think that was a very interesting and good subject at that time, and I used to enjoy it a lot. The second question is, did you enjoy studying history at school? Why and why not? In the early days I didn't like, and I have no interest in history because the history seems to be a boring subject at that age. But with the passage of time, whenever a student has more awareness regarding society, and when we are able to comprehend our roundabouts or the things regarding history, so we are more, I think, easy, and we are more at ease with the subject of history. So I think that with the passage of time, I grew interest in that. Though in the early days, it seems to be difficult and weird thing because I have no basically the background of the things and background of the events. But with the passage of time, whenever I grew some basics, and whenever I came familiar with the basics of the history, I got interested in this subject. The third question is, how often do you watch TV programs about history now? How often do you watch TV programs about history now? Now I think media has more coverage regarding historical topics, and we can have more access as compared to the past, and we can enjoy different type of things regarding history. So I watch usually many programs regarding history on TV, and there is a historical channel which shows the particular ages in the history, human history, that tell us about what the different civilizations used to be, how they behaved and how they lived, and what were their circumstances were. Okay dear students, our next question is, what period in history would you like to learn more about? So we have to tell which period is our favorite, and we want to know more about that. So basically there are so many periods in human history that I am particularly eager about, and I want to know more about them. But particularly I would like to talk about Industrial Revolution. That was actually an era in human history where Europe was marked by unprecedented progress in all fields of life, especially after the invention of the steam engine in the later part of the 18th century, particularly about 1760s and onward. So mankind made a lot of progress, and actually machines replaced human effort to a lot extent, and resultantly there was a lot of unemployment in the human history. So the result was that Europe actually expanded their means, and they started the practice of colonization and imperialism in order to gain more assets and more raw material to make, or in order to prepare, or in order to produce more things. And second more important thing is that they wanted access to the markets globally or worldwide. Okay students, we move towards part 2, that is cue card. And in this cue card, it has been asked that describe the neighborhood you lived in when you were a child. So I have to talk about the neighborhood, the place I used to live in my childhood, and the hints are where in your town, city the neighborhood was, what kind of people lived there, what it was like to live in this neighborhood. So basically I would like to talk about my neighborhood when I was a child. I was actually in a village. So in that rural area, the childhood was actually fantasy like. There were so many things to dream about, and things were very simple and very rustic, because the reason was that the material race has not over obsessed or overwhelmed the human history, and the humans were actually very innocent, and they have real passions, and they were filled with the love of humankind, and they have care and affection towards others. So I think that was very good age, and people around me, they were very cooperative, they were very caring, and they were all actually just, they have filial relationship. We all have, it was just like a bond of family, and we used to share everything. and even our neighborhood was just like our family. We never realized that we were actually strangers, or we were unknown or untoward persons. We always used to feel that we have a close relationship, and in orders or in untoward situations, in an emergency, they were always ready and eager to help one another. And I do remember that whenever my parents were not at home, it was very easy task to share meal with the neighbors. So our next door neighbors, or even the next door and the very next door and third next door neighbors, they used to share and send meal to us. And things were very cooperative, and nobody was reluctant to ask anything from the neighbors. But now things are changed. And the last hint is what it was like to live in this neighborhood. It was actually really very fantastic and very, I would like to say, memorable period at that time. The reason is that everything was natural, pure, and that was genuine, and people have love, people have care towards others. But now I miss those days, because the reason is that another important thing is that childhood is always a carefree time. You have no burden, you have no responsibilities, and you are just in your own world of fantasy and imagination. So that's why I miss my neighborhood. Moving towards the part 3, that are discussion topics. The first is, what sort of things can neighbors do to help each other? What sort of things neighbors can do to help each other? There are so many things that can create a bond of love and cooperation between the neighbors. Like, first of all, if a neighbor needs something, the second neighbor or the other neighbor should be always ready to help other or provide that particular thing. We should not be very mean and stingy. We should be generous and open hearted, and if someone asks for something, we should try to give it to him or her. And second most important thing is that how can we create love and affection among our neighbors, is that there are certain occasions, there are certain events in our life where we can send or we can transfer gifts and other eatable items with our neighbors. It actually enhances, it increases the love and affection among our neighbors, and it is a good thing. I think humans should always respect and appreciate this thing. How well do people generally know their neighbors in your country? How well do people generally know their neighbors in your country? In this concern, I would like to categorize our neighborhood into two basic I think groups. First is rural neighborhood, and the second is urban neighborhood. Talking about the rural neighborhood, in rural neighborhood, people are more close, they have more affinity, and they have more attachment, and they are just like a family. But talking about the urban neighborhood as compared to rural neighborhood, I think the people don't like to be mixed up or mingle up with one another. They want to protect their own, I think, privacy, and they don't want to be very familiar with one another. So if we talk about the urban neighborhood, the living style is quite or diametrically changed. The reason is that in urban societies, people are busy round the clock. They don't have excess time, they don't have spare time in order to get familiar with one another. They are always busy in the money pursuits or materialistic aspects of life. So the society is, I think, more estranged and aloof as compared to the rural areas. So the third question is, how important do you think it is to have good neighbors? How important it is to have good neighbors? I think the importance and significance of neighbors is more as compared to relatives. Why? Because at the time of emergency, relatives come later, but the neighbors are always there to help you out. The best way to forge good relationship with our neighbors is to grow or cultivate the habit of patience. If we are patient about small things, small mistakes, like sometimes it happens that we get furious over those issues and those things, and we get out of control. So I think those things should be ignored at any cost. Otherwise, it creates animosity and hatred. And otherwise, if we start ignoring those things, because life is a mixture of ups and downs, and if we are ready to ignore and sacrifice and be patient with the small and trivial aspects of our neighbors, reluctantly and reactantly, whenever we have the same situation, they will be always patient. So I think this thing can bring good relationship with our neighbors. So thank you so much. It was the end of part 1, book 17.